one more speaker. I'm going to call him our headliner because he came all the way from Freiburg to hang out with us. It's amazing what people will do for free pizza.
Especially when they're vegetarian.
Yeah, right. But Deep is up next.
Okay. So, well, if I were to walk down Barnes & Nobles or Thalia here, I think, I would just walk past this book and never turn around and have a look at it. Just an ugly cover, right? And look at the jargons they have: shift, trigger event. Wow, doesn't tell a thing about what you're talking about. But there's a story which I want to tell you and why this book became such a big thing in my sales career. But before that, can I ask you, how many of us here are salespeople, direct salespeople selling frontline and sales management? Okay, wow. Okay, so what I want to do is I just want to give you one actionable item at the end of this book review where you could put it to your action if you're a direct salesperson, and if you're sales management, you could put in action for your sales team at the end of this task. So if you have any questions, just definitely add me up on Twitter. Now, what happened was 2 years back when I set up my IT consulting company, I got a call. I was really struggling bad. I got a call from my ex-colleague from Salesforce. And he had joined Google, and he was heading to Google sales in one territory, one country. And I was just ranting about, how bad I was doing, and, I'm not able to get cold calls through, and it was really hard business. And he said, Deep, you know what? You should call my friend. His name was Freddie. You should call Ralph. And Ralph is actually, he just signed up for Google Apps, and he's joined a startup. He was my ex-colleague at Google. Now he's joined a startup. I think he's at a perfect position to buy a CRM solution. So why don't you talk to him? Bang. I called up right after in 30 seconds, spoke to him, arranged 2 meetings in next 3 days, and closed the deal. Now, it took me 4 days from first contact to the end of the deal, to the end of the sales cycle. Normally, what takes me 2 to 3 months happened in 4 days. Now, an important lesson that I learned from that experience was, in sales, timing is everything. In fact, effective selling is selling to the right person at the right time. Now, what happens is, most of the time we concentrate on right person. Who's the ideal customer profile? Who's the right business we want to be talking to? Who's the right person? Is it a person above him or person down him, lateral? It's a person with money, authority, and influence. And that's what a challenger sales guy would do. That's what a predictable revenue talks about. Who do you sell? How do you sell is something that's covered a lot. But there's one thing which a lot of sales books didn't talk about, and this is what shift selling did for me, is it talks about time. What about time? What about your sales time? When is a good time to be in a customer account? Is it when the guy says, it's really urgent. In fact, we wanted this as of yesterday. Send me the real code. Send me your quotation. How many of you would really jump for joy and say, yes, I got it, right? That's a situation that we want all the time. But the fact is, that's a bad situation to be in. That's a time when the guy says, yes, I want the solution. He's searching for alternatives. You're not the first guy he's talking to. Maybe you're the second or third or even 10th guy he's spoken with. So that's not a situation where you want to be happy about. The other situation is you go to a customer and say, hey, I want something. This is what we sell. And that guy says, we are happy about it. I think one of the presentations covered status quo. They have something already in the store. They're happy with the current situation. They don't want to move together. So there are 2 times when we come to the deals, either they have not looked for some solution or they've been actively looking. There's a small window of opportunity which this book talks about. It's called window of dissatisfaction. That's a time when the person has realized that he needs something. There's something wrong. It's not that he needs something. He realized there's something wrong. The situation could be better. He's ready to move from status quo, but he's not there. He hasn't found time to look for solutions. So he's not looking for alternatives at this point in time. And that's what is called window of dissatisfaction. So from status quo, once he identifies his want, he moves to window of dissatisfaction. And from window of dissatisfaction, when he thinks he can afford it, he starts calling all the salespeople. So I think I was talking to Victoria. Where's Victoria here? Yeah. That's where we find ourselves when you're looking at competitors. When you're searching for alternatives, you go to the scene and they've got a lot of companies on ground. They're talking to a lot of people, and that's when you talk on pricing. That's where you start talking about pricing. There's another situation I was talking to Jeff. Your solution is novel. Nothing. There is no other company that's doing that. Status quo, because the company hasn't found a real reason to change from the current position. So what happens in status quo? The customers are happy with the current solution or the current status. They're really relaxed. They don't have anything to worry about. In searching for alternatives, they know that they're looking for a change. It's really high, and they're actively looking. In window of dissatisfaction, they feel the problem. They know there's something wrong, but it's not high up in the to-do list. So how do you know these guys are in that situation? You send an email or a cold call, they say, no, thank you. That's status quo. right? They're just upfront. You spend more time educating them, teaching them, taking control of the situation, be a challenger sale, you would fall flat in this situation. If you go on the other side of the spectrum and you say, can you send me the quote? Again, do the same thing. You're going to be fighting against your competitor who probably has done a better job. And what does somebody in window of dissatisfaction says? When you hear, call me in 3 months, you should say yes. Because what happens is in those 3 months, he would find some way to make that a priority. He would become a more active researcher of that problem, and he would probably find a solution. And when he says, call me in 3 months, you should find a reason to call him in 2 days or 2 weeks. Engage him. That's a quick thing that you could do. Somebody says, we'll be in a good place only if he doesn't know, what he's trying to tell. He thinks he knows the problem, he thinks he's happy, but there's only one small thing he's not happy about. So when you have this kind of conversation, that's your window of opportunity, that's a window of dissatisfaction. Now, why should you be in window of dissatisfaction? Because if you're in status quo, it's longer sales cycle. It'll take a hell lot of time to convince that guy that he needs something. When you're in searching for alternatives, it's low win rates, low price points, and these customers actually switch vendors for price. But if you manage to educate somebody, build relationship with somebody in window of dissatisfaction, you establish high value for your company and your product, you bag bigger deals, and you have they have at this point in time, they have a low attention span. You manage to get their attention span to increase a little bit in that for your solution. So that's a key thing that this book talks about, window of dissatisfaction. Did you say it was 5 minutes per slide, or? Yeah, I just got a couple of more. I can't disclose everything this book talks about. I would highly recommend to pick it up and read it. But there's one. You would ask me, when does this window of dissatisfaction happen? Is there a point? Is there an indication when I can tell this window of dissatisfaction happens? Usually, there's a trigger event that causes this window of dissatisfaction. Now, trigger event is some big event, some change. Well, I would define a bad experience, a change in the organization, or a new awareness that your buyer has built up that causes that event and window of dissatisfaction. Now, the funny thing is, you can never predict what's a bad experience. So as a sales guy, how can you go to a random account, cold call, and figure out he had a bad experience with his previous solution? That's hard to predict. And awareness, your prospect has developed awareness of a situation or his problem. That's also hard to predict. So the trigger event which you want to focus on is a change in the organization. And when I say change, it's probably they're launching a product, they're opening a new office, they're funding announcements, they're doing, they have funding, they have relocation, they won a contract, they're hiring some people who could make a decision. In fact, there are about 36 events that we calculated, and there are certain ways to track them. I'm happy to give you a link where you can download this at the end of this. So let me know if that would be of interest. Yeah. Now, the last part of this conversation is there's a window of dissatisfaction. There is trigger events. How does that fall in line with your sales strategy? So there are two ways to go about it. One, you would expect that you want to get information about this inbound. That means somebody gives you on a silver plate or silver spoon and tells him that there's something happening in this organization, just like Frederick did to me, right? That's inbound. For that, you have to build referrals, right? You have to become the emotional favorite of somebody. So I became emotional favorite of my ex-colleague at Google. He wanted me to succeed. He gave me a referral. And this book very well talks about that. So go and pick it up. It talks about emotional favorite. How do you use referrals to become the magnets for the trigger events, right? The other part is outbound. So when you yourself are proactively looking for events that make a difference, and that is you use certain tools, you use phone and emails, and you structure them. So I'm going to answer your question when you asked if Aaron would be happy with the concepts of challenger sale, especially when they have 4 different divisions. So challenger position is happening at every point. If you are SDR, you could be a challenger. If you're an account executive, you could be a challenger. And that's what you're doing with trigger event selling. You're challenging those events and things that happened after that. I would encourage you to download a book which we wrote recently about tools and examples of these trigger events. If you're interested, you could go to Berlin Sales. I've created those lists, and it explains on what 5 steps you could follow if you're doing an outbound sales to look out for these trigger events. So at the end of the day, I just want to leave you with 2 concepts. One, recognize your true competition, right? It's not just the many people who are doing similar products or somewhat related, but it's also a situation where the customer is in status quo, where he doesn't feel the need to change. These are the true competition. That's the main competition that you would lose to 60% of the time. The intelligence is not going bang on and head on with that competition. And the second thing is, leverage the trigger event. That would speed up your sales cycle at least by 60-70%. What I did in 4 days, from 2-month sales cycle, you could do that as well. So do that, and that's my biggest learning. Understand your competition, leverage your trigger events. My question to you is, what trigger event, think about it, what trigger event works in your industry? What trigger event causes your prospects to change their thinking? And how do you identify that? Just think about that. It takes 2 or 3 levels of questioning to find that trigger event. If you have some doubts, if you have some questions about that, feel free to contact me. Happy to do that. This book that we did would also talk about a little bit about trigger events. You can find this presentation over there as well. So that's it really from my side.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I would like to share a story, and I think that's a huge takeaway.
Sure.
And it relates very much like I can connect the 2 books, the ones before that, How to Sell to Bigger Companies, and this book. And it happened to me like probably 3 weeks from now. We had like a trigger event where a company actually merged.
Yeah.
And their answer was, we should have this from yesterday, but they just registered as a new venture, so
sure.
It was like a venture capital.
Sure.
And a company of 150 users, which
sure.
would normally, like have a sales cycle of months, a year, a week, and it was done.
Awesome.
So I can really relate, and I think it works.
Awesome. So your job as a sales guy is to replicate the ways you found out about this merger information and find out where you can find this merger information all at once. And reach out with the same message that worked with this guy.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's fantastic.
So I think it's good. Once you realize it, it makes it much more powerful.
Yeah.
That this actually can be a strategy, not just. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Any more?
Yeah.
I'd just like to add a comment to that. Again, this is more from the management point of view. Like, I think this is really good from the management strategy, but if you start talking to the reps of your team about these trigger events, and you open up the window for a lot of excuses why things are not closing. It's always timing. Timing is sometimes a reason, sometimes it's not. It's the easier excuse, it's the most polite way to say no to a poor value proposition being presented to a decision maker. So I think for people managing those teams, I think it's you've got to be careful into how you present the solution, and the sales development team is the one that needs to be fully aware of what these triggers are, so they go onto the account executive team.
Sure.
But I would be hesitant to just enable them to say, hey,
sure.
yeah, no, it was a timing issue.
Sure. And how big is that team for the SDRs that you have, or a sales team that you have?
At the moment we have about 15 SDRs.
Sure.
We are 9 account executives and about 12 account managers.
Sure. So when you've reached that level of 15 people, I would expect or think that maybe it takes a whole lot of experimentation and trying out methods at your stage before you roll out any strategy or any ideas to that. I would actually play very close here to what trigger events really make sense and very carefully roll out to these 15 people. But you're right. I mean, yeah, it could, if you just give them an open book, things would go anywhere. But if you are very prescriptive on what events to look for, what kind of email message should be there, how do you challenge the recipient of the email with the title, with the question at the end, it can work to your advantage if you know those trigger events. Great point. Anyone else?
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks.